writers, you're listening to the Kobo ReWriting Life Podcast, where we highlight an episode from our backlist that will bring you insights and inspiration for growing your self-publishing business. I'm your host, Tara Kremen, Director of Kobo Writing Life. This week, I picked an episode from 2019 with best-selling author Brenna Aubrey. Brenna talked to us about her writing career and how she's found such tremendous success with translations. And while this interview was sort of pre-AI translations and the opportunities that it has and has currently opened up to authors, I wanted to surface it anyway because I think there's a lot of relevant info here about translations in general and marketing in a language other than your own. Also, top tip, if you have translations for your books, please reach out to us at writinglife@kobo.com. We would love to feature your titles because we are only growing our global reach and our global catalog. So please let us know and enjoy this episode.
Today, I have with me a very special guest, Brenna Aubrey, who writes geek romance and has been a Kobo Writing Life author for many years. I've had the pleasure of working directly with you. Thank you for being with us today.
I'm honored. Thank you for asking.
Thank you. So I want to start with that tagline, actually, geek romance. How did you land on that niche, if we're going to call it that? And
I guess it is a niche within the larger contemporary romance market. Yeah, it's definitely a geeky contemporary romance. And there's a little niche there. But fortunately, I've been able to get and find lots of readers who normally read contemporary romance and knew nothing about gamers and geekiness. So how I got started in it is basically I've been a gamer. I've been a geek since high school and video games. So when I sat down to write my first contemporary, at any price, when I sat down, I wanted to make my hero, it was kind of trying to appeal to the billionaire market too. So I thought I'd make in tech. And then I thought, well, why not just make, running a game company? And so it kind of went from there.
Got it.
And so I made my heroine a gamer geek girl, and fortunately didn't have to do a whole lot of research there because I had all that experience myself. I often joke I would have probably started publishing much earlier if it hadn't been for my gaming habit. But hey, in the end, it helped with the writing. So.
Absolutely. And have you found that niche really resonates outside of, a gamer, obviously kind of cohort? You're reaching broad contemporary romance readers, right?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, most of my readers are broad contemporary romance readers. I do have my cluster of gamer girls that love it because they really identify with the heroine. But, when I read reviews, World of Warcraft has hugely dominated, those type of games, like World of Warcraft, but especially World of Warcraft itself, is so popular that everybody knows somebody who played WoW, either a husband or a relative or a son or daughter. And so, I have a lot of readers who go, now I think I understand now why, so-and-so loves it so much, because they were able to kind of see it from character's point of view and why the characters love it so much and are able to relate to each other.
Oh, that's really cool.
Online.
Yeah, love it. I didn't know that. And so when did you get started? Can you give us just a quick snapshot of your writing and publishing career from then to now?
I have been writing for a long, long time. I used to do tabletop gaming, Dungeons & Dragons. I made up this really interesting character. The group I was playing with, Dungeons & Dragons, usually run by a GM, and then you have your own character within the world. It's kind of like an interactive, if you're familiar with the game at all. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit like an interactive story where you all get together and you're all telling a story together. But I had my character, and I wanted to develop her backstory. So I just sat down one night just to write a brief biography of this character in a fantasy world. And I kept going and going, and I was writing it very much like a novel. And I just kind of stuck with this really intricate story, and it ended up winding up into this huge, prolonged, 4 books. And I didn't know what I was doing back then. It was just hobby. It was fun for me. On a given night, instead of sitting down in front of the TV, I preferred to go up and work on my story instead. After a while, I was passing out pages to friends, and they'd read it and they'd say, "This is really good. You should consider trying to get published." And I'm like, "Well, I don't know anything about the publishing business at all." So eventually, as time went on, it was recommended that I join Romance Writers of America to learn more about the business. And I'm like, "Well, I'm not a romance writer." At that time, I wasn't. I was writing just straight high fantasy, Game of Thrones style, not quite that dark, but that along that line. But I had read a lot of romance when I was in my teens and early 20s. And then I kind of veered away, and I was reading a lot of fantasy and science fiction at that point. So anyways, I joined Romance Writers America. I started making all these great new friends, started learning all kinds of amazing things about the business in general. And of course, then I started reading a lot of the authors that I was meeting. And I kind of fell back in love with the genre. And so I wrote a historical romance, and I did the whole, query, got an agent, went on submission. And at that time, historical romance was kind of on a downturn in popularity-wise with New York. That's actually a very strong market with self-published authors, but New York was kind of veering away from publishing. And this is where kind of the unique part of my story comes in. While I was on submission with that historical romance, I had this idea that had been nagging me forever, the idea for At Any Price. And it was that a gamer girl decides she needs a lot of money for medical school and to help her with her mom's medical bills and those type of things. And, obviously it's a story that takes place in the United States and not Canada, where you don't have to worry about medical bills. And so she makes this controversial decision to auction her virginity online. And that was the whole premise for At Any Price. And so, it's this really kind of controversial, hooky idea. And I wrote it while I was on submission with the historical. The historical kind of made the rounds and got roundly rejected. And at the same time that I was writing At Any Price, this was in 2013 or early 2013, the self-publishing was really taking off by that. I had a couple of friends in my RWA chapter who had been really successful and was self-publishing. And the genre was is contemporary, but also kind of bordered new adult, and new adult was taking off really well. And so I thought maybe I should self-publish this. So I was sitting at lunch with my agent, and I was telling her what I was working on. And she said, "That sounds really interesting. Can I read it?" And so I sent it to her, and she read it and sent it back to me. And she said, "This is really, really good." And she gave me a couple of, suggestions or how to change it. She goes, "I'd like to shop this to New York." And I told her, "Well, I'm really thinking about self-publishing this." And she says, "Well, I really think that there would be a positive reception." So I was still really, really torn at that point. This is the summer of 2013. And RWA National Conference was in Atlanta. And I was still, teaching through the school year. I was a high school teacher. So I borrowed some money from my mom. I said, "Mom, I really think I should go to this conference because I've got, there's a strong possibility I might be able to sell." And so I went to this conference, and there's all these great self-published authors there that were talking about, Liliana Hart and Bella Andre and all of those. They were doing these workshops and sharing all their info. And I was getting so excited. At the same time, my agent was pitching to editors. Anyways, long story short, because I know this is not what we're here to talk about.
I love it.
I came home. I started taking steps to self-publish. I scheduled an editor, scheduled a cover designer. At the same time, my agent was talking to editors in New York, and they were getting very excited about the book. And so it turns out the book went to auction with 4 different publishers wanted it, and then 2 were kind of fighting over it and went to auction. And so I got this really amazing offer for 2 different Big 5 publishers who wanted the book. And I kind of weighed things over. I asked a lot of questions. I didn't like about that time that non-competes were getting very, very kind of grabby for rights. And I wanted to be able to self-publish while I published, if I published with the, I wanted to also be able to self-publish at the same time. And they couldn't promise me those type of things. So I didn't feel comfortable with it. And I really kind of had studied it out. I talked to a lot of other authors and went with my gut, and I decided to self-publish. I blogged about it when I released At Any Price, and that kind of went semi-viral within the community. And so I was kind of known for the person who turned down the 6-figure New York contract. But fortunately, it worked out really well. It really changed my life because in 2015, I was able to quit my teaching job and become a full-time author. And it absolutely was the best decision for me. And I'm not saying that's the best decision for every author, but definitely the best one for me. And I'm really glad. And, I published wide right from the start, and I've stayed wide this whole time. And I'm really happy with that too. really thing that really surprised me is the way I'm able to reach international readers,
Yeah.
especially on Kobo.
Awesome. I love that story. And before we move on to the global reach and translation in particular, because that's a layer of expertise that you have that I would love to just share with our listeners. When you think back to that decision, other than the non-compete, like what were the key factors in you knowing that going independent versus with a publisher was the right choice for you for that book? What was most important to you in taking it on yourself?
That's a great question. And when I blogged about this, I did list the non-compete as one of the reasons, but I had two other main reasons, and I probably would add a fourth one. But the other two, when I blogged about it, I liked being able to control the publishing schedule. So the book was released almost a full year before it would have been released if I'd sold it to New York. And so at that time, new adult being extremely popular genre, everybody knew it was going to crest pretty soon. And so I wanted the book out as soon as possible, and none of the publishers could promise me anything earlier than a year out from when they signed the contract.
Right.
So the time schedule was one. And the other thing, when I put in my blog, was that at the time, they were pricing their ebooks at like $7.99, $8.99, $9.99. And I knew as a brand new author, with people buying new e-readers, that people weren't going to take a chance on a brand new author at that price.
Right.
And these are things that I discussed with the prospective editors who wanted the book, and neither one of them could promise me any kind of competitive pricing. So ultimately, I think, just to sum up, I think it's just having control. Right. Control of what my covers look like, control of what I price the books at, control of when I release them. That is definitely the number one perk of being a self-published author, is just having that control over your career. And of course, things are going to happen in your personal life that may affect the writing portion, but the publishing portion you have complete control over. And sometimes that's a blessing, and sometimes it's a little bit of a detriment, because then if you have the full control, then you really have to find that drive within yourself to get the books out in a timely manner. And
right.
Tough when you don't have an outside deadline that's been imposed on you.
Yeah, you are accountable to your fans and your self-imposed release schedule, not to an editor to get the rest of that advance check.
Yeah.
Right?
Although the readers clamoring for the book does help a lot as far as getting motivated.
For sure, of course. So you are a really excellent example of an author who has managed to break out and do extremely well with translations. Can you give a sense of what that success looks like for you? You don't have to give a dollar figure for like how much you're making on these things, but like maybe how much they've grown as a percentage of your sales over the last couple years.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the compliment. I appreciate that. There are several self-published authors that are doing really well with translations. And one of the reasons I felt it was important for my brand, number one, I've always been very globally conscious. I mean, way back in the early days of publishing and learning how to advertise on Facebook, I think I was one of the few first, definitely not the first, but a lot of the authors I talked to were not thinking globally about their books. When they were doing their advertising, it was to the US market only, whereas I was creating ads for UK, Canada, the other English markets, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand. So I was trying to really work hard to build a readership with my international English-speaking audience. But I've been a foreign language teacher. I taught French for 21 years in high school. And so I've always had kind of a broad thought globally in terms of, appealing to different audiences. And I definitely absolutely wanted to see my books in French. But I hesitated to go French first because I know that the French-speaking population, or at that time, they're still very attached to paper books and buying books in bookstores. It's still very much part of the French culture. So I went with the Germans first because after I'd done research, I'd realized that the German market was picking up a lot of an ebook audience, that e-readers were selling really well in Germany. And so when I was looking to branch out, and one of the reasons I did that too is because I as my books started to come out, they were taking longer and longer to come out. So I'm not a frequent publisher. My books are long. They're much longer than typically your average contemporary romance is anywhere from 70 to 80, 85,000 words. And my book's, the shortest one is 95,000 words, and they go up to 120,000 words. So they're long and wordy. They take a while to get out. So, and I was thinking, it's great being able to push my backlist in English to the different markets. But what if I had, more books? This was a way for me to be able to publish more books without having to up my production to a point that I wasn't capable of doing. So I thought, okay, maybe I can try another language and see if that can fill in the gap of my publishing schedule. So I very much think of my business. My husband and I work together. He does a lot of the production end of mine. I'm the creative, and he's the one who does a lot of the back end stuff. He's my formatter. He does everything with my webpage and my newsletter list and all of that. So I needed a way to be able to produce content without having it be, more coming from me. And so I started to reach out to find translators. And the great thing is that once I do the footwork to finding the translator, he does everything else. So I can kind of pass it on to him, and he's the one who handles the contract and all of the paperwork and the project management with the translator. So eventually it's gone to the point where a good solid 30 or more, depending on the year and depending on how much I've been able to publish, a good 30% to 45% of my income has come from translations over the past 3 years. My first translation came out in late 2015 in Germany. And then I kind of broke out. I put the first trilogy out in German, then I put the trilogy out in French and so on. And now I'm in 3 languages besides English. So I'm in German, French, and Italian in that order.
And I think that's really smart that those are the 3 that you targeted. We obviously see a lot of growth happening in all 3 markets. And thinking about it from a logistic standpoint, at what point do you think an author should think about translation in their career?
That's a great question. And then also we have to discuss that there's more than one way to go about, translating. You can traditionally publish your books, and many self-published authors are traditionally published in the foreign markets because they sell their rights. And, that's a totally viable option. As for me, I wanted that control. I wanted to be able to market the books, and I wanted to be able to see the higher return. A lot of times, pretty much most of the time when authors sell their rights to the foreign markets, unless it's a very big market, they're not going to get anything beyond the advance.
Yep.
And with the smaller market, that's perfectly fine. But with a big market like German and French has grown tremendously, and so is Italian. It really is worth it to consider doing the work to do the self-publishing, because you're selling so many volumes, you're going to get your full percentage from that, as like you do with your English books. And the readership is such that it's definitely worth it to cultivate. So I would advise any author thinking about translating to look at their backlist, look at their most successful series, look at the comparable titles if those books have been translated into that language, and see how well they're doing. Of course, that you've accumulated enough earnings that you're ready to invest back into your business. So you're making enough from your books that you can pay yourself and you can live, but you also have money set aside. We usually invest a certain percentage back into the business. And so you've accumulated enough that you can pay a good translator. And I emphasize good. And so you're going to be paying anywhere. This is an investment that's similar to like an audiobook investment, depending on the length of your book, of course. If your book's longer, then it's going to cost more to translate, like mine do. Definitely the more, the better up front too. Like I spaced out my releases on my German books, and I wish I'd put them out all very close together like I did with my French books, because it was a much more successful release because of that.
Right.
So those are definitely the number 2. Number 1, that you've got a series that's selling well. It really does not pay to translate a series that's not selling well. into another language because it's probably going to have a similar reaction in the other market.
Makes
So
sense.
it's still, a series that's selling well that you can continue to put out, and then also that you have enough money that you're able to reinvest back into your business.
Wonderful. And so in terms of budget, typical audio, you're thinking, you're sitting around $2,000 to $5,000, anywhere in that range, depending on the amount of time. So you're saying similar ballpark?
Similar ballpark for every language except for German. German typically is more expensive. German translators can command a higher fee for several reasons. Number one, it's just the market. Good German translators, it's a more competitive market to find them. And the other factor is that by German law, German translators are due a certain amount of royalty, depending, by German law. But a lot of them will take that up front, and you can write it out in the contract as part of the events. And so it works out to be a higher, almost I'd say 1.3 or 1.5 times more than what you're paying for the other markets.
Makes sense. And then last kind of pragmatic question in terms of setup, how did you find your translators, or how would you recommend an author find a translator that they can trust? Because a lot of authors, I know you actually have a language background where you can do spot checks yourself. Mm-hmm. A lot of authors, that's not true. They might be able to find a friend to do it for them if they're lucky, but it would be a whole lot easier if they started on the basis of knowing that the work is
right.
Good.
Well, there's definitely certain criteria I recommend. First of all, you absolutely need to make sure that your translator is a native speaker of the language that the book is being translated into. Mm-hmm. So if someone says, and I actually had someone write to me and go, I have a degree in French and I'd love to translate your books into French. And I'm like, I have a degree in French too, and I know enough that I know that I don't know enough French, and I'm not on the level. I mean, I'm fluent in French, but I'm not native idiomatic fluent. Mm-hmm. And so I don't have the command of the language enough that I would be able to do that, besides, of course, too, it being not a good use of my time. I'm better off producing my content in English. So yes, your translator should be a native of the language, but they also have to be a good writer in that language. The one thing that you need to know, especially if you're not bilingual, is that writing and translating, it's not an exact science at all. It's an art. It's taking the flavor of the source and kind of being able to project that same flavor in your native tongue, so that figures of speech or, famous stories or fables that are common to our culture, our English-speaking culture, might not be well known in the target language culture. And so a good translator would be able to find an equivalent in order to convey the same thing.
For sure. Makes total sense.
So, number one, native speaker. Number two, a good writer. The way I suggest finding out, there's some sites like Elance and Upwork. I think they're the same one right now, or Babelcube, however you say it. That one too. Now that one's a little bit trickier, because if you find your translator via Babelcube or Babelcube, you agree to keep using that translator. If you keep working with that translator, you have to do all of your work through Babelcube, and then they upload, and you have no choice. It's royalty share. However it is that you, based on how you agreed to it, they will upload all the books to the stores. They take the money and then they split it back out to you and the translator. Mm-hmm. So you lose a bit of control if you go through Babelcube, but it is a good way to find translators. Upwork, Elance, and then other ways you can do it. You can ask for referrals from other authors who are translating. They may or may not be able to share with you, depending on the fact that if they're in the middle of translating my backlist, I'm not going to be giving my translator's name out to a bunch of other people, because, hopefully they're committed to doing mine until, they reach a point where I run out of material for them to translate. But another way that I've used, and this is how I found my Italian translator, and she's excellent and very, very quick. She can translate way faster than I can write, and so she's pretty much caught up with me. And I've only been working with her for a little over a year. But I found her by I went on the bookstore site. So in the language, I went on Kobo Italy, and I started browsing in my genre. I started looking at books written by authors that I knew in English that were comparable to my books, or people that were, customers who also bought this, based on, who your comparable authors are. So I went and I looked at my comparable authors on the Italy store, and usually the translator is credited either in the sample part of the book or on the actual site or in the book description. And I just made a big long list of these names, and then I just got to work Googling their info to reach out, and I cold call, I emailed translators and explained to them that I was already translated into other languages and I was interested in the Italian market. And I got some emails back. Some weren't interested in working with me. A couple were. I reached out and I asked them to translate, a few pages. They will usually do that for you if you ask to get a sample translation. Yeah. And then the great part is then this is where you're going to get your readers involved. Because, of course, I don't speak Italian at all, and it's not close enough to French that I would be able to tell that it was a good translation. So I reached out to my readership. I found a few native Italian speakers who read in English and who had connected with my books in English. And I reached out to them and said, would you mind reading this if I send this to you? Would you mind if just taking a look at this and telling me if this feels like the original?
Yeah, I love it.
They were so happy to do it because, your super readers love your books and they want to be able to reach out and recommend your books to their friends, but not all of their friends read in English. If they're in a non-English speaking country, their relatives and friends may not read in English. So they get all excited because I want to show all my friends about how much I loved At Any Price. And if it's in Italian, then I can, share it with all my friends. They love being part of the process and being involved too. And you can acknowledge them and the acknowledgements and all of that too.
I love it. That's so smart. I've never heard of that before. You're so sleuthy and also genuine. Obviously, it comes from getting that engagement going. That's great. Love it.
Yeah.
Great
it's
advice.
Fun. It's fun because they love it too. They really love getting involved and being part of the process too. Yeah. And then once the process is in motion and you have that first book set up, it's great for authors who use assistants because you can just hand it off and then they are the ones that kind of handle all the, when's it going to be due? What do we do about cover? Usually for the cover, I just get my cover designer to translate the title and use the same design.
Yeah, I love your covers.
Oh, thank you.
It's interesting. Not all romance actually, the covers can't necessarily translate to other geos. The Italian and French markets are quite different, but I find your covers actually have a global appeal, which I don't know if that's just because of your background or you've been doing the global reach thing for so many years now, but yours are unique in that way.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So listeners should definitely check out your covers, Brenna Aubrey, and look at them in different languages and take a minute and think about whether your covers will match to the market you're trying to go to. And if not, it's worth doing a different cover, I would say. Or just, if you're aiming to have a global reach, or make the original cover have that potential as well.
Yes, definitely. And the good sources for how to tell if a cover is going to have that global reach, talk with your translator about it, talk with your super readers who read in that market, and also go and browse the store yourself. Just get a sense of what the other books that are selling well, what they look like.
Awesome. So one extra question. I saw that you still have your agent listed on your website. So you're still working with an agent right now?
That's a different agent
okay.
than the one in the story. We broke pretty much right after I made the decision. We kind of decided to go our separate ways. And so this is a different agent. I'm only working with her it's a long story, but basically she got an offer that she wanted me to write some books for. And so she reached out to me and that never panned out. So she's still my agent in name only, basically, but we've never really had an opportunity to work together because I've never sold traditionally. However, some self-published authors do have foreign language only agents, and they choose to sell their rights that way for that reason.
Perfect. That's exactly what I was wondering, if you were, planning to look at other languages through an agent or anything that I didn't know.
I would love to sell my rights to some of the smaller languages in, the smaller markets. I wouldn't mind at all selling my rights traditionally. I haven't had that opportunity yet. I haven't really had the chance to reach out and do that yet, or the time. But that's definitely a goal of mine. But I'm very happy that I decided to go the self-published route with these 3 languages.
Okay, so let's say I'm a self-published author. I get an excellent translation, a great cover. My books are out in the French, Italian, and German languages. From a marketing standpoint, what are the best practices for engaging these readers in a totally new country and language that I potentially don't actually speak myself? How do you do that?
It's not easy. I have to say it is a challenge. And I think that's probably the number one thing that kind of stops at most self-published authors is that point right there. How do I market these books if I don't speak the language?
Yeah.
So here is my advice. Now, obviously, I don't have that problem with my French books. I'm able to market my French books and engage with those readers because I speak French already. Mm-hmm. But the other 2 languages, I had a semester of college German that I sometimes draw on to talk to readers when they write to me. But so as from a marketing standpoint, as far as running ads, okay, first of all, the typical ad sets that we use, the newsletter ads like BookBub and, Free Booksy and Bargain Booksy and all of those newsletter type of ads, they obviously don't have the reach in the foreign market. So you can't rely on those. For sure. German does have we kind of call it German BookBub, but it's not really. It's called Book Deals. Yeah. And you can run ads through them, but that's about the limit. As far as I know, I have not yet found a reliable or comparable source for the French market, and I would love to. So if any of you out there know of anybody doing a newsletter for French readers, let me know. Reach out to me sometime. But as far as social media advertising, what I did is I came up with a bullet list. I know a lot of the advertising points that I use when I advertise my books in English. So I made a bullet list of all of those just random phrases and sentences. And I created this list and I sent it to my translator, and all 3 of my translators have been really, really kind, and they translated the bullet list and sent it back to me, so that now I have kind of a mix and match phrases that I can use to put together into sentences and ad copy. Mm-hmm. Things like on sale now, or first book in series free, or read on your e-reader now, or things like that. Just different, all the different little advertising points that you use. And I just had them translate that. And then I just kind of mix and match when I put the ad together, and I choose a compelling image, just like you do with an English ad. And that's what I do for social media. Instagram is really good in those markets as well. Facebook for advertising.
So let's say you post that ad, and sometimes people actually reply to the ads with a comment, like someone writes back in German. Do you do a Google Translate kind of response? Yeah.
Absolutely. And I even say, I'm sorry, I'm using Google Translate, or sometimes I don't even bother, because they can figure that out. You know, and they're just happy that you answered them. They're so sweet. I just released my latest book in Italian 2 days ago. So I've been getting a lot of Italian emails and people reaching out to me on social media in Italian, and they just write straight in Italian, and they know that I don't read Italian. So I'll take their comment, I'll copy and paste it into Google Translate so I know what they're saying, and then I'll get back to them. The other thing I wanted to say, and I skipped this about the marketing, is you do definitely need to have a bit of a web presence in the target language, and that's super easy to do. You can buy a domain in that country and just point it at your website. I have a page for each of the languages. So anybody listening, if you're considering doing this, go look at my website. And I'm not doing that. I'm not saying that for self-promotion purposes. I'm just saying you can use it for an example. I have a little flags in the corner for each language. You
Awesome.
can click on that and you'll see the books in that language with all the information. And I also have my mailing list. So I have a separate mailing list for each language. And so the readers are able to sign up in their language to get notification. And again, with the same thing, I either use the pull quotes, or if I want to write a more long involved note, for example, I'm going to be signing in Paris in a couple months. So if I wanted to tell my readers about the sign, I already did, but I'm able to write more about that. Now, obviously I did that, but anyone else who doesn't read or write in French could just send that a paragraph to their translator. Also, on a smaller scale, if you can't get your translator to do it, you can get people on like Fiverr, things like that. I mean, obviously the quality, you're going to have to find people that you trust that put out decent quality and aren't going to just run it through Google Translate. But if you can get somebody in that language to just kind of give you a quick eyeball to tell you whether or not it's written well. Once you get your people in place, and you have them, you can reach out to them to do the small jobs as well.
Awesome.
Email list, website. I don't do anything else. Some people have a Facebook page in that language. I just basically, I run it all out of my same social media, but sometimes I'll tweet in French. Sometimes I'll post in German. If I have a new release, I'll put the German cover up with a blurb and I'll say coming soon or available now or pre-order, something just really brief like that. Mm-hmm. And then at the very top of it, because I'm writing in the foreign language, I'll say for my German readers, so that anybody looking at the post will know why it's in German or why it's in French or whatever.
Smart. Awesome.
Yeah, I just don't have the time or the energy to run the foreign language social media for each language. So I just run that all through my main page. But definitely website, not so static. All you have to do is basically add. You don't have to be translating your blogs when you blog or whatever, but just putting your books up with your buy links on the website and maybe just when the next book is coming, or the common questions that people ask.
Yeah, amazing. I want to do just like a quick fire round of a couple questions. So you already mentioned that you started out by going to RWA, but is there any other key conference that's made a big difference for you in your career?
I've attended the NINC a couple times. There's great information there. That's Novelists Inc. in Florida, and they meet every year. Great resource. RWA also has regional conferences. If you can't travel to their national conference, they do. The chapters will every so often in certain regions of the country do a regional conference. It's kind of like a mini version. It's also cheaper usually. I've done a couple of conferences for self-published authors. They're not really regular. There was one in Hawaii and one that was in Houston this last year for self-published authors. But the main ones that I've attended with a lot of great info were RWA and Novelists Inc.
Awesome. What is something that your fans might not know about you?
Something my fans might not know about me. This is a total surprise question. I don't know. Probably my life is super boring. I mean, I guess they all know that I'm nerdy, that I write about Star Wars in my books, and I might have characters that argue about Star Wars in my books and stuff like that. I mean, everyone. My books pretty much reflect my own interests, so it's kind of hard to have. I don't have that many surprises.
That's fair.
Yeah, I'm pretty much an open book.
I like it. There you go. So no secrets at this time, but that's okay. You can always feel free to share those with us. What is a goal that you're working towards right now?
A goal that I'm working towards right now, I want to be more consistent with my releases. I had a rough patch here where I wasn't able to really get a book out. It was a combination of a bunch of things going on. I had some health struggles, and I also had some other issues going on in my personal life. And so I wasn't able to get a book out almost a year and a half, which is a long gap for a self-published author. Yeah. And I'm back on schedule now. I just released a duet really late last fall. And so those books are doing really well. Those are not gamers, actually. That's a brand new series about astronauts. And the astronauts kind of work for a SpaceX type private commercial company, but they're also contemporary romances. How I like to say it is they're military romance with my geeky bent. So military plus geek, I saw as astronauts, being smart and kind of geeky, but also, what most readers love about military heroes, being protective and strong and able to,
awesome. I love it. Very cool.
Yeah. So anyway, another goal is also to be able to branch out in some more languages. I'd love to, maybe touch the Portuguese market. I hear there is a great deal of readership in Brazil. I'm not sure though. I'm hesitant just because I need more information on how well e-readers are catching on in other countries. That's the main block, because if people are still really, really attached to their paper books, they're going to be shopping in physical bookstores, which unfortunately self-published authors normally do not have their books in bookstores unless there's a strong request for them. So the countries that are still really attached to paper books are going to be shopping in physical bookstores, whereas fortunately with the French market, that's kind of, they still love their paper books, but that's also the market where I make my strongest paperback sales of all my markets. You hit it
on both ends. That's awesome.
Yeah. So anyways, yes, another goal is to branch out into another language. I'm thinking maybe either Portuguese, or I also hear Dutch is a really good market as well.
Yeah, Dutch is amazing. Dutch is growing for us big time, but it's also very expensive, similar to German.
To the German, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Last quickfire question is, what is the best piece of craft advice that you have ever received?
I think the best piece of craft advice I ever received was when I was first starting out, and I knew I had to, make my work better. And I thought making my work better would be to submitting my chapters to other more experienced authors in my romance writers chapter for critique, getting professionals to evaluate. But actually, somebody told me one time, find someone you trust who's on about the same level as you are in their career and with their writing. Just kind of pair up with them and just back and forth, critique each other's pages, brainstorm with each other. And so I was fortunate to, after a lot of fits and starts, I found someone, and she has become a great, great friend. But I found someone who we were on the same level. We had similar goals, and we hadn't published yet, but I felt we were very similar in skill level. And I learned so much, not only from her critiques of my work, but from critiquing her work. A lot of the things that I was picking out of her work, I was like, oh, okay, either this is one of my strengths or it's something that I'm not doing that I should be doing. And I think that really is what helped me take my writing to the next level. To become a professional, was from amateur to professional, was to have this partnership where I could go back and forth and we could work on improving each other. And I really felt like her writing also benefited as well.
And who is that?
Oh, her name is, she writes as Kate McKinley.
Oh,
she's awesome. She writes historical romance, and she's self-published as well. There are so much about self-published foreign market. There's the nitty-gritty details, like, what should the contract look like and things like that. These are things that I've been invited to talk to different chapters about. So, definitely make sure you have a professional contract and that you have an agreement on when it will be delivered and a payment schedule in the contract, as well as your legal information, the translator's legal information. Make sure everything is on a contract, especially if you're paying part of it up front, depending on how you two agree to do the payment schedule. But I definitely don't suggest you pay everything up front. However, most translators will request a deposit, and that's perfectly, fine. But and again, this becomes less of an issue as the more you build this relationship with your translator. And I mean, with one of our translators, we don't even do a deposit anymore because they just know we're good for the money when they turn in the work. But it all depends, and just make sure that you and your translator are protected. Also make sure that you're paying a fair wage, that your translator is getting a proofread / edit, or you are doing it. Just make sure that agreement's in the in the language of the contract as well. It's kind of overwhelming and daunting, and I think a lot of self-published authors shy away from it, but it's like everything else. If you just start with baby steps. I just had that one book translated into one language, German, just to test the market, and I was so happy with how that book did, that it was able to I jumped in with 2 feet into that German market, and I've had bumps along the way. I'm not saying it was always perfect, but it's definitely been worth it, in the end, because it's really diversified my income. And I feel like, I've always got something. Like, for example, we just barely did our first and free. We just barely did that with Italian. So now we're hoping for a little bit of an income jump now, because I have the other 5 books paid, that once we take the first book free, we hope to have that same, jump in income that we did when we did the books English and languages. So.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel like it's such a smart way of treating this business and taking advantage of all the global opportunities that are available to indies right now. But you have to approach it from a business perspective and with knowledge, and not many people have the amount of knowledge that you do. So thank you for being so generous with your time and learning the lessons that you learned along the way. And again, if you want to see an example of the work that you've done, your website is it just BrennaAubrey.com?
BrennaAubrey.com for the English website, and BrennaAubrey.fr for French, BrennaAubrey.de for German, and BrennaAubrey.it for Italian.
Yeah, so do some research, dig into Brenna's work, and see how she's putting this business plan into action and seeing great results. Thank you for sharing your story with us.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I was pleased to talk about it. And I know there's a lot of other questions that people have, so feel free to reach out. My contact form is on my website if you have questions.
I love it. Thank you for offering that. That's great. All right. Bye, Brenna.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Kobo ReWriting Life podcast. If you're enjoying this podcast, please be sure to rate, review, and subscribe, and follow us on socials. We are at Kobo Writing Life on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and Twitter. This episode was hosted by Stephanie McGrath and Chrissy Monroe, with production by Terrence Abrahams. Editing is provided by Kelly Robotham. Our theme music was composed by Tearjerker. If you're ready to start your publishing journey, sign up today at kobo.com/writinglife. Until next time, happy writing!